Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, November 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Northwestern game is in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 24 days. I'm joined by Kevin Noon here on the indoor at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We just talked to Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and Brian Hartline about the upcoming Ohio State Northwestern game. We really didn't actually talk about the Ohio State Northwestern game. We just talked about stuff that's sort of tangentially related to the fact that Ohio State is playing a game, and we'll find out on Saturday who the mystery opponent is. But today we're going to talk just pretty much about the Ryan Day segment of that, and we'll do the show later in the week with some clips from some of the other guys. But there was a lot to talk about at a Ryan Day's press conference, and they came out after a win on the road at Penn State. That's one of the two probably toughest games on their schedule all season, and this is Ohio State, so the standard is, what do they need to do to win the national championship? So a lot of the conversation was about the running game and the issues with the running game. What did Ryan Day have to say about that?
Yeah, honestly, we got into a lot of minutia about positions and everything else, and or out of formations and what you're doing under center, what you're doing on, coming out of the pistol. Obviously, they gotta do a better job in terms of running the ball, but there were a lot of questions in terms of the pistol, and they had 5 plays out of there. 4 of them were successful runs. Why aren't you running it more out of the pistol then at that point? But you want to get away from certain tendencies, and Michigan is keeping an eye because, all right, let's be honest. Nobody's talking about Northwestern. Nobody's going to be talking about Indiana. Nobody's going to be talking about Maryland. It's all going to be focusing on that last game. But it's going to be interesting to see what the running game looks like just based on how the roster health is at this point. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but. You sit there and you look at 2 weeks where the running game probably has not necessarily been up to the level that we saw earlier in the year. Is it a matter of that teams are catching up? Is it a matter that the health of the running backs is just not great? Is Ohio State tipping pitches? There's a lot of talk out there that Ohio State's tipping pitches. They got 3 weeks to get it figured out before this monumental game against that team up north, and I have a feeling that Ohio State will get it all figured out.
Yeah, I was really interested in Ryan Day's response because he was asked about the fact that they're very, very, very run heavy out of the pistol formation. That's something that I've talked to Ross Fulton about for a couple of years at this point. And Day was asking, do you need to mix things up a little bit more and be maybe a little less predictable, where you look at that formation and go, Ohio State's in the pistol, that means they're probably going to run the ball. He would kind of push back on that idea a little more firmly than I was expecting, even, where he talked about if there's an offset back, so they're in the shotgun and the back is to the right of C.J. Stroud or the left of C.J. Stroud. That kind of tells the defense a lot about where the play is probably going. I think they can sort of align, okay, if he's on the right, we're going to maybe align more for the play to go this direction, or if it's on the left, the other way. And the pistol, the fact that he's straight behind, even if it tells them that it's more likely than not going to be a run, it doesn't necessarily tip them about direction, because you can go either direction from that, and you can go inside, you can go outside. So he liked that. He also said, they did get a big pass play out of the pistol, because you broke a tendency against Iowa. You got a big long touchdown against Iowa out of that. And he really pushed back on the idea of the the lack of diversity in terms of pass versus run out of certain formations having really anything to do with it. I thought that was kind of interesting. You talked about some of the injury issues at running back, so let's talk about the injury issues at running back. Neither Trey Henderson nor Mayan Williams are 100% right now. No. We have not gotten the availability report. I am not expecting to see Mayan Williams this weekend, and you may or may not see Trey Henderson, depending on how cautious they want to be with him. You already don't have Evan Pryor for the rest of the season, so that means you have Chip Trayanum and Dallin Hayden are your 2 healthy scholarship running backs. TC Caffey, the top walk-on, is also not healthy. So you've got, you have one of your top 5 running backs coming into the season who's, presumably close to fully healthy. And then you also have a guy who was playing linebacker 3 weeks ago, who now they've moved kind of back over to running back. Is Chip Trayanum ready if he gets his name called on Saturday?
Well, it certainly sounds like he was ready this week. Ryan Day said with an additional week of practice, he'll be even more ready. While he didn't come right out and say that we're going to see a big dose of Chip Trayanum, it sure sounds like we're going to see a big dose of Chip Trayanum and Dallin Hayden. The weather in Evanston, as of the Tuesday weather reports, rainy, windy. Could that cut down on a little bit of the throw game, maybe the deep throw game, maybe not so much the intermediate game? Ohio State needs to figure out some things in the run game. Do it with Down Hayden, do it with Chip Trainum. Heck, we might even get to see another carry or two from Mitch Rossi, Xavier Johnson, somebody else who could get thrown into the mix as well. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife out there. But with Chip, he seems to be rounding back into old form of what he was able to do at Arizona State. I mean, he grasps the offense. It's so much more than just get the ball and run to daylight. They're blocking schemes. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So it's just not put in JT Tuimoloau and let him run over. That's not how it works. Okay, on a 1 yard goal line plunge, you just sit there and say, okay, you're going to the B gap on this. I mean, but when you're out there playing running back for real, it's a lot more than just run to the light.
Yeah, and there was a lot of interesting stuff that we learned on Tuesday. One of the most interesting things was something that Ryan Day apparently also learned in the last few days, which is there was a rule where Ohio State got called for some false starts on Saturday, where it looked like Penn State had jumped into the neutral zone, and that had, triggered Ohio State to jump offsides or false start. But the penalty was called on Ohio State both times. Ryan Day, got an explanation on that. It sounded like that might have been a new rule to Ryan Day too. It was definitely a new rule to me. So can you explain what the deal was there? Because I know that was a big topic of conversation on Twitter.
I may need you to explain it to me because I'm not sure. I was down on the field for one of those such plays, standing right across, and I watched, and I'm like, that's offside. And it jumped there. But it's if you're in the box or you have somebody face up against you, then you're given the protection. If the guy moves, that's where the offside comes from. If not, it's a false start. But being Cade Stover, who was the tight end and not necessarily had somebody face up against him, that he didn't have the protection. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think it was P.J. Mustipher, who was one of the nose tackles, jumped, and so if Luke Whippler had moved in response to that, or maybe even one of the guards, I'm not sure if it was like one or two, one person in each direction or whatever, if one of those people had moved, they would be protected and the penalty would go against the defense. Cade Stover is at the end of the line, and because of the crowd noise, he's looking in at the ball. He's watching the ball to make sure the ball gets snapped. He sees the motion from the Penn State guy, so he moves. But because he was, he's outside the tackle, a nose tackle is, like I said, probably the guards in the center are covered under that rule. If you are several people down the line from that, you are not protected. So therefore, when the false start happens, or when the motion happens from Cade Stover, then it does get called on the offense. So that was one of those. I know I saw a lot of people on, even people who are like very smart football people, looking at that and saying, why, explain to me why this was not on the defense, and that is the explanation. So that was one of those. It was one of those good, real football minutia things, and how many times it's going to come up. But one of those things that we like to get you answers on that kind of stuff. So that was the answer on that one. We've talked a little bit about the next month, and here we are in November. Everyone knows what game Ohio State plays at the end of November, but there are 3 weeks between now and the Michigan game on November 26th. So you've got Northwestern, you've got Indiana, you've got Maryland. The first two of those teams are not bowl teams, let's just say that. And then Maryland is maybe a bowl team, but with Talia Tagovailoa's health not 100%, what is Maryland going to be when they play Maryland? So Ryan Day was asked, how do you, we all know, let's just address the elephant in the room. There's a game at the end of November that we all know everyone's thinking about. You guys have a big wall inside your facility, all about that game. So how do you maintain your focus and your, sort of stay on task the next 3 weeks between now and the game that we count down to on this podcast every day of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about yourselves at that point. It's really about, holding yourselves up to your certain standard. I mean, you have to go and play against the opponent that's there, but, your competitive excellence, your competitive stamina, all of those things are all called into question at that point. Obviously, there's going to be people who are going to be asking Michigan questions every single opportunity that it's there, because that's what this is shaping up to be a, 2 versus 3, 1 versus 3, 1 versus 2. I mean, depending on how things break, depending on how the college football playoff rankings look at that point as the first ones come out, you have to focus on yourselves. If you're focused on yourselves, it's a lot easier to shut out some of the noise out there that's going to be about the Michigan game, or some of the noise out there from the pundits saying, well, Northwestern shouldn't be within 7 touchdowns of you, and Indiana shouldn't be this, and Maryland shouldn't be that. If you have your focus in the right place, then it's a little bit easier to get to that end position.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. My daughter is a figure skater, and sometimes you'll go into a competition and you'll be the only person in your age bracket and skating this specific event. So the way it is, what they say there is you're skating against the book. So if you do the required moves correctly for whatever that competitive thing is, you can get first place. You're going to get first place if you do them, because you're not skating against anyone else. If you don't do all your required moves, or you have a violation of rules, even though you're skating by yourself, you get second place. It feels like Ohio State is sort of skating against the book this weekend, maybe skating against the weather as well. We'll keep an eye on that one, but it does feel like Ohio State's kind of skating against the book this weekend. That Northwestern is probably not going to present a real serious challenge for this team, unless they are -5 in turnovers, which, again, we'll see how the weather goes. But Northwestern has to play in the same weather as well. So that may be one way to look at this weekend's game. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is obviously a topic. This is we have to check the box because everyone wants to know about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. What did we learn about Jaxon Smith-Njigba?
He's still on the team.
Big if true, yes.
There's still optimism about getting him back at some point this season. I mean, we heard that from Ryan Day. We heard that from Brian Hartline. But we were shut down very quickly in any conversation about injuries. If we do it on one, we got to do it on everybody, yada, yada, yada. So, I see the pendulum swing back in the other direction in terms of even being able to get a little crumb or morsel of information there. But, for now, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is not going to be able to go. He's been very upbeat. I mean, he's been able to Zoom with the players before the games, because he's not going to be on the travel squad, because you need to bring players that are going to be able to play, and JSN is not in that position right now. But he's got to go through his own things and be able to sit there and stay positive about things. But it does not sound like he has left the program, that he's shut it down, that he's signed with like Lee Steinberg or something like that. I mean, it's just going to have to be a little bit of a wait and see.
Yeah, so no Nick Bosa situation right now. So just, it's going to be a wait and see. Definitely do not expect to see him at Northwestern this weekend. I would not expect. But, as far as Maryland or Michigan or, Big Ten championship game or college football playoff, that's all TBD. Hey, speaking of Michigan, Ryan Day was asked a question, no context, just like, Ryan, so if you've played games in stadiums where both teams have to use the same tunnel, is that a concern? Ryan Day, really the context around that could be literally anything. Who is possibly to say? Ryan Day had just sort of a very funny response to that, and it was asked a couple different ways, because when you're trying to work on a story, you want to quote, and you're trying to ask it in a way that it will get answered. Ryan Day, just his response to that was just kind of very funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some great moves from running backs through the years, but his way of ducking it and trying to avoid the contact there was very impressive. He wanted no part of it. Understood, appreciated that, reporters had a job to do and questions had to be asked, but he was not going to comment on it. And, we all had a pretty good laugh about it, because it was very obvious what it was about. And, so we go from there. But, the good thing for us that, here at Buckeye Huddle, we can all coexist, with one entrance and one exit from the field.
Yeah, it was very funny I don't want to say this was his direct quote, but it was essentially like, laugh and then, yeah, I'm not going to answer that. Like, sorry, I know what you're going for, but I'm definitely not going to answer that. So that was, we have seen Ryan Day a little more tense and a little more, not quite as loose as he was today. You sort of get the sense that, you see big game Ryan Day, and then this is, you got to treat every opponent seriously. Am I crazy, or did he seem a little more relaxed and a little more like, okay, you got to go on the road, and there's always a challenge in the weather and all that kind of stuff with Northwestern. But, it felt to me like this was a Ryan Day who felt pretty comfortable with how things were going to go this weekend.
I'm not here to put words in anybody's mouth, but Penn State is now in the rearview mirror. Michigan is still several weeks away. The next 3 opponents, while they still have helmets and shoulder pads and scholarships, are probably not the 3 greatest teams that Ohio State could face on its schedule. I think there is a chance to exhale a little bit and be able to work on some things. I mean, that doesn't mean that Ryan Day is necessarily sleeping any better or not stressing out about this, that, or the other, but he certainly was a lot looser, more smiles and everything else during the press conference. It was very noticeable.
Yeah, getting to talk to these guys week after week after week, you can start to sense, because a lot of times everyone has to say the right thing about, respecting the opponent and all that kind of stuff. You can sort of sense, deep down, maybe it's going to be okay this weekend, and we'll see how that plays out on Saturday for Ohio State. But that was kind of the big stuff we heard from Ryan Day. We talked to Jim Knowles, we talked to Brian Hartline as well. There was a lot of good stuff from them as well. We'll do a show later in the week with just clips from those guys, just to let you hear directly from them, because there was some really good and some pretty funny stuff from both of those guys as well. So, and this is our Wednesday morning show, which means it's going to drop Tuesday evening. And if you are listening to this on Tuesday evening, make sure you join us for our live college football playoff rankings show. That'll be 7 o'clock on Tuesday night on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you were listening to this after that, well, good news. You can go back and watch it at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Kevin and Tony and I will be watching that playoff rankings reveal show live. You always learn a lot from the first one. This is not, a lot of stuff is going to change between now and the one that actually matters. But the first one, it feels like you always learn a lot about where the committee's at least starting, what the committee's at least valuing that season, how they're evaluating, was that an impressive win for Ohio State to go on the road to Penn State and win by 13 points? Or was that an unimpressive win because it's a team that got clobbered by Michigan and they were trailing with 9 minutes left? You learn a lot of that kind of stuff, and how are they stacking other teams up right now. So we will have a full, probably, that's usually an hour 15. That is quite a bit of talking on the college football playoff rankings reveal show. So I'll start at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And hey, speaking of Buckeye Huddle, fantastic place to get full coverage of the Ohio State team. Kevin, Tony, and I are obviously covering the team itself. Mark Givler and Alex Gleitman on the recruiting beat, and then Justin Whitlatch and Devin Radcliffe, and of course Ross Fulton on X's and O's. Really great all-around coverage of the Buckeyes during a time of year when, boy, there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about with the Buckeyes over the next month or so. So join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up today. It is less than 50 cents a day, and I dare say worth every penny and possibly more. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.